I think one of the first stories that really said something. I think you kind of right. It was when I read Akwa K. Maze's Who Is Like God, and I was like, I can write.
Yeah. Again, congratulations on being shortlisted for the prize.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed reading your story. How do we even start talking about that story? How do we start? Because we argued a lot. We got a couple of entries and we had a lot of good stories. And your story was one story that we argued a lot about whether, we should include it in the long list. But yeah, I think what I really liked about the story, because I personally really loved it, and what I liked about the story was that from the first paragraph, it absorbs you into the story. The reader knows what they are getting into from the first paragraph. There's a lot of context, and there's context about the characters and about the place where the story is happening. There are lots of new names, very unusual names. Njika, Nyirigango. How do you pronounce that?
Okay, that's actually a mountain in Uganda. So that was like, that was where I got that from.
Yeah, so there's So there's Nyirigango, there's Nerilugu, and the language is so delicious just from the first sentence and throughout the first paragraph. So I wanted us to probably start off from there and talk about how important it was for you to choose those names. And to let your reader get into the story with those names. And then how much thought did you give to the first paragraph of the story?
Okay, I want to start from when you talked about how there was a lot of arguments concerning the story. I felt it would be that way. I really, when I wrote the story, when I finished the story, I was conflicted. I was like, okay, maybe this is not like the best idea. Maybe the path I took with this story was not exactly. I was just conflicted about it. It took me a while to even send it out, and I had a feeling if it gets to perhaps readers or editors, there might be something. There might be like kind of a little clash when it comes to that. But it's fine. It's okay. In regards to the first paragraph and the names that I selected for it, I guess the first paragraph, I really wanted the readers to see Njika's defiance, that her rebellious nature. I really wanted to get into that as quick as possible. I wanted the readers to see that. So that was where I was going with the whole thing. And in regards to the names, mostly, apart from the Irigango, which was borrowed from another country, most of the names were Nigerian names, mostly Igbo names. I think Njika was more of a short for Njideka in that light. I picked also Amina, Dubain, Nerilugu, Mother Who Climbs Mountains, and the rest of it. So it was a whole thing. So the story took me a while to put together. And by the time, even though at first it was not, I was conflicted about it. But by the time I got to when I had gone through it over and over again, I just felt, this is where we are. So yeah, that was mostly it.
Yeah. How much thought did you give to and how much time did you? The first paragraph, was that something you thought a lot about? How much thought did you give to the first paragraph? Because there's a sense in which the first paragraph has so much. There's the interaction of the character with the setting, the place where and I also saw, because I read your other story, Where You Go, and I saw that in the first paragraph of that story as well. From the first paragraph, there's an interaction of the character with the environment. And I wonder if that's something you consciously do as a way of immersing your reader in the world of the story from the very beginning.
Oh, okay. I guess, yeah. I like to be very visual with my writing. I really like the readers to see what I am seeing, because that's the whole thing. So yeah, I did give it much thought. I don't even think I started with that first paragraph. I think I started like the body, and then I came back all the way to the beginning. It's a thing that I do where I usually start from the middle to write down, and when I really understood the story, or where I'm going to with the story, I think it kind of helps me to know where to start the story. So yeah, like I said, I really needed to be very visual. I really needed the readers to see, to immerse themselves in the worldview or what the place looked like. So that as the protagonist along the journey, they get to see the things she saw, feel the things she felt, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so it did take me some time to get into that. It did take me some time. It wasn't even the first thing on my plate. It came in later on when I had like really gotten the meat of the story. So it came in later on, and it was something it was something that it was more of, I had to learn the story to be able to give that beginning. Yeah. But I'm also fascinated. You said you've read Where You Go. I think that is actually my first published work, and I'm really glad you said you've read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that. I read your interview with Natalie in Africa in Dialogue.
Yeah.
Just as a way of getting some sense of who you are as a writer. And I noticed in that story, as well as in this one that you wrote for Afritondo, that you use, like, you traverse different locations or different places. So with this story, for example, the names are not just Igbo, right? They're not just Igbo characters. There's Amina. And there are names that I don't even know where they're from, like Neolude, and some names that I can't even pronounce, but I loved. Sorry,
it's Benin. I went from Benin. I went to school in Benin. So yeah, I got a feel of the place and the culture and everything. I was there for like 5 to 6 years. So I really enjoyed staying there and the people and whatnot. So I also took names and aspects of my story from there as well. Yeah.
Why do you use different names? Names of people or different characters, rather? I think the question is, why do you have characters from different places in your story?
Okay. I think it's mostly a thing that I do. When I write, I try to, as much as possible, especially for Nigerian names or people, I try to take from every culture, try to represent different aspects, because Nigeria is a what's the word they use when they talk about? It's congested it's ethnically congested. So I try to represent that in my stories as well. I try to represent the people who live here. And yeah, it's a thing that I do across the board. It's a thing that I try to do across the board. Most times, not very consciously. It's just something that I just do. Different names, but across different, although most times it happens to be mostly Igbo, because me being Igbo, so sometimes it just happens that it might lean on the evil side of things, but I try to go across the board when I tell the stories. So yeah, that's why people have also said that you get to see plethora of different kind of names, different kind of people, and whatnot. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Now that I have read Where You Go, I saw a couple of connections between that story and A Girl is Blood, Spirit, and Fire.
Yeah.
So, for example, one of the things I noticed was that word fledgling, to fledge. It was something that appeared in both stories. Also, there's the notion of spirit sisters. It's something that appeared in both stories as well. So I'm wondering what you think are the and I also think that I was curious about the protagonist, the narrator of the Where You Go. I'm wondering if that character is a character in the story you submitted for Afritondo, and who that is, if it is, and what do you think are the connections between? Because I think the two worlds probably intersect somewhere. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, you're actually right. I wrote Where You Go first. I think when I explored the aspect of the fledging, I think it was very brief. I think it was just like a line or a paragraph where I tried to show where the protagonist came from, her roots, before she went out into the world and had a family and everything. So, but for A Girl is Blood, Spirit, and Fire, you're actually right. I was not entirely, but the character from Where You Go, it was me kind of mirroring what her life as a younger person would have been like. So yeah, it wasn't entirely where I was going with it, but it does look that way. It does look that way, and yes, it was a whole thing. Across story that I write, when I look at it myself, I tend to see connections between each story, no matter how brief, no matter how minute, but there's always that connection. I think it helps me. It helps me with my writing. It helps me to stay grounded. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but yes, there is a connection between the two stories. It was me exploring an aspect of Where You Go in a more broader sense, and in a more broader sense, and seeing if I could tell that part of the story in Where You Go, that very brief part, if I could give it a wider meaning, if I could give it a more wider meaning. So some people might call it a prequel, if that's, some people might call it that. Yeah. You are right. It does spill over. There's a spillover into from Where You Go to A Girl is Blood, Spirit, and Fire.
Just to be clear, that character, the protagonist in Where You Go, is not in A Girl is Blood, Spirit, and Fire. Is she?
I guess.
Is she one of the witches? Do you think? I'm sorry, I'm making you make a decision.
No, it's fine.
It's okay. It's okay if there's no connection. It's fine. It's okay if it's not the same person. I
didn't write it for my readers to say, "Oh, I see this person. I've seen her there somewhere before." That was not the intention. Maybe personally, maybe for myself, I had that intent. But when I was telling the story, when I want readers to read it, I'm not entirely banking on them saying, "Oh, I saw this person here. Is she the same person? Sometimes is that the same?" No, that was not. But personally, I guess, well, between you and I, yeah, maybe she's somewhere there. yeah, she's probably somewhere there in the mix.
Writers. You create this world of women, lovely women, powerful women, brave women, curious women, different kinds of women. It's a world of women. Men are not allowed in. There's even a part of the story where, it's explicitly said that the men are not allowed in, and it's a way of keeping yourself or sacrificing yourself, something like that. And I think I have two questions on that. The one is, why do you do that? I think that's question one. One is, why do you do that? The second is, how did you do that? Because I think when I was reading it, I didn't imagine that the writer would be a man.
Okay.
And so when I saw your name, when I saw the name and I saw the person, I was like, how on earth did you inhabit this world of women, and how did you do it so well? So I'm curious about why you do that, and how you're able to get into that world and do it so convincingly.
Okay. I think growing up, I got my childhood was there were a lot of women around, different kinds of women, from in different personalities of women. It was a whole thing. That was that when I think of my childhood, it's those women's faces I see. And so it's not entirely the most conscious thing. When I wanted to write that story, I felt, I knew it needed to be a world of women. It needed to be a story about women, and it's a thing we actually fight with, because being a man myself, it's always the tendency that you might tell the story in a way that might not entirely, how do I put it? Might not entirely represent these people, represent women, or you might. It's a thing that happens when you see men write about women and they write it not well, and they write it not well. So that one, it took me a lot of caution. It took me a lot of learning, a lot of asking questions. Does this work? Is this the way I'm telling this? Is it right? So it took me a lot of asking questions. I had to ask a lot of questions before I put these characters to paper. So for those, why it was that way, why it was a world that was dominated by women, a story about women, was what that story needed to be. And that was where the entire thing, the place, the setting, the sorcery, the spiritualism, it was one that was directly connected to women. And so to tell that story, it needed to be about women. And why I think I was able to do that was because I asked questions, regardless of my childhood, regardless of me being surrounded by women or being raised entirely by women. I don't think it's enough. I think we still need to learn along the way. There's a lot to learn. You need to ask questions. You need to understand. You need to understand several personalities, several people, or where they're coming from, to be able to really tell those aspects of their lives. So I guess I don't know if that entirely answers the question, but it's
yeah, it does. A question that came up for me as you were talking is, where did this story idea come from? Where do you think? How do you remember when the idea for the story came to you? Was there one time, or did it build over time? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the first time I heard about FGM, I think it was with this movie with I think we won't tell the first time, but
sorry, I hope we're not spoiling the story for some people, but continue.
Oh, okay.
It's fine, it's okay.
Okay. The first I heard about that particular aspect of that it was a thing amongst some tribes, some people. It was very new. I really didn't understand it. Mostly because it's not something that is done to people of my gender, or it's not something we experience. So when I heard that, I don't know, I think it was in a movie. I can't really remember the name of the movie. And I didn't know what it was. I had no clue. And I would actually say I was maybe a teenager then. But I really had no clue what that was. So I think I read up on it. And even then, I still did not understand. Even then, I still did not really entirely understand what they were saying, or why this thing needed to be the way it was, or why it was necessary. It was the whole thing. And so it's one that has actually stayed with me for a while. It's one that and I won't be the first person to be telling the story. It's been done across films, across stories. So I kept seeing it even as time went on. I kept seeing different cultures or tribes who still participated or who still believed in that particular in that act. So yeah, so it's one that has been there for a while. It just took me until now to pen it to paper. I really needed to understand. I really needed to know, I really needed to know how to tell the story. I really needed to know how to tell the story, to tell it in a way that was right. So, although it's one that has been there for a while, it's something I'm only just writing very recently. Circling back to the question, which was why, sorry, the question again, I don't want to veer off.
I think it was just a follow-up question on, and I was asking how the idea of, where the idea came from, and
okay.
If it was something that built up over time, or it was just something that just came to you at a moment.
Oh, okay. No, yes, like I said, it wasn't something that came to me at the moment. It was something that I have been seeing in books, in stories, in media. I've been seeing that aspect of some certain tribes, for some certain cultures, and yeah, it's an overtime thing, and it's only till recently, after I've thoroughly educated myself on the subject, that I decided that perhaps I can tell the story now with both while still learning. I can tell while still understanding, and while still, perhaps I can tell the story now. And even though I told it in a speculative light, as opposed to people who might tell it in a more use a more direct approach, or in a more literary sense, I still also wanted to bring that to bring it out there, to say that this is the thing that happens, and people need to know. Yeah.
And you did a great job of doing that. I thought that the story was, and especially, that the part where you describe the ritual, that was surprising, and also the way that it was done. It gets to a point where you it's almost like you give us very little information. You tell us about what happened, but you don't go into the details. You don't make it gory. And I thought that was really thoughtful of the narration, right? I liked that part of the narration. And I also liked how what's that woman's name? Nemoroha was described as this goddess, this god. It was really well described before the ceremony. And yeah, so based on what you've talked about, I want to use that as a way of getting into my next question, which is, and it was something I thought about. I don't do speculative fiction at all. And I didn't know I was someone who liked speculative fiction because I didn't read them growing up. But for some reason, I've been the one on our team who is always like, this story is really good. That happened last year with a couple of stories. And I think why that happens is when speculative fiction is when it's done in a way that you feel that the characters are human beings. It's done in a very realistic way, that the characters are so very well developed and so alive, and the language, is also very vibrant. So I wondered if you could talk a bit about how, I think there's the thought or the belief that genre fiction writers, speculative fiction, thrillers are all for the commercial success and all for money, and they don't pay a lot of attention to literature in quotes. And so I wondered if that was something you wanted to comment on, especially with respect to your work. How do you use your work as a speculative fiction writer to comment on the human condition?
Oh, okay. To be honest, when I sent in the story, I was like, speculative fiction. I know people don't take it very seriously, so I'm not. I didn't. It wasn't really in my mind at all to be on that long list. And when I did get on the long list, I kept saying, when people talk about it, I'm like, actually, I wrote speculative fiction also. I kept saying it. I'm like no, I wrote speculative fiction. It might be a whole thing, and they might not really be into it like that. So I was really worried about it being speculative because, like you said, we are not. People don't really see it from the most serious light. Mm-hmm. You're not the one who win the Oscars or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's not. We are mostly for the cash grabbers, the entertainers. It's a whole thing. So, but when I tell, because when I started writing, one of the first things I ever wrote was literary fiction, and I think it's something that I still try to do, then through the magic inside. So it's yeah. So I try to still give this. So I try to still give my characters soul, give them humanity, give them. Let people see them, let people move with them, let people understand them, let them be real. And then the whole sorcery or it's sci-fi, whatever it is, let it be. That's for me personally. Let it be what stays in the background. I still want, because if I already say this is a speculative story, you'll be expecting some speculative aspects of it. So I don't entirely see the need to for it to be in every single line. So, yeah, it's already a speculative story. You will get the speculative aspect out of it, but I still need my characters to be. I still need my characters to be felt. I still want them to tell the story. I still want them to be alive. And it's a thing I try. It's a thing I really, really give a lot of thought as I write. The characters. what they're doing, what they're feeling, their emotions. I still want them to be people, regardless of whatever is going around them, because of the magic, because of whatever it is that's happening around them. I still want to be able to tell real stories as well, real things in our world, be it in regards to culture or society at large, whatever it is. I still want to be able to embody that while still telling an entertaining story. So yeah, it's and I think a lot of writers are also doing that as well, telling very amazing speculative stories while still being true to the world that they live in, while still trying to represent or trying to tell the stories that are happening. As much as speculative fiction might be something that can be conjured from thin air, or some of the aspects can be very otherworldly, some writers still do their very best to bring it down here for people to really connect to it, connect with the characters, connect with the story that is being told and whatnot. Yeah, so it's a whole thing. My friend Chizaram, he's brilliant. Tells the most brilliant speculative stories. We went to school together. We were classmates in secondary school. So it was a whole thing. As much as we're the same age, I think he was one of my teachers. Really taught me to be thoughtful in telling stories, to be very thoughtful, to really think about the things I'm going to say, things I'm going to do. What effect will they have on both the character and whoever is reading it? And so it's a whole thing. And to be able to tell these stories about these people while also bringing in the speculative aspect, but not to lose sight of the character and their journey.
Yeah, that's a great response. There's a part in the story where Njika goes to see Dubem in the tower, and after they've talked, Dubem asks Njika to hold her, and they hold each other and they hug. That was a very human moment, and I felt it. So yeah, what you said about grounding your stories in realities, that's a really good thing. The other questions I have for you are just concluding questions. The one is, how are you feeling about your journey so far as a writer? First of all, how many stories have you published?
I think I've published one more Menana was my very first story. Maybe 3.
Okay.
Was it? Yeah, 3. I guess 3. But I also write poetry, so I have more poetry out there. But for stories, it's 3. Although I have more works coming out this year. Yeah, but they're not yet out, but they're all coming out this year. Yeah.
Yeah, so how are you feeling about your journey?
Well, I think it's still a journey. It's still a journey, and for the fact that I started writing poetry because I didn't feel like I was like, can I actually write a story? But then Chizam was like, no. I was like, well, maybe I could. I think one of the first stories that really said something, I think you can write, was when I read Akwa K. Maze's Who is Like God. And I was like, I can write. I could try. Maybe not, I will not be as brilliant as this, but I could give it my best shot. Mm-hmm. And when I was in university, I read your story, the one that won the Retivism Prize. Mm-hmm. Friend sent it to me, and I was like, I think those stories, both Akwa K. Maze's and yours, it was the character. It was not necessarily where they were. It was just them. I don't know how to explain it, but I think that has really influenced that has really influenced me as a writer. I investing in characters and also telling it not only in a thoughtful way, but in a way that the readers can just grasp what is going on with these people. It's not about like beating around the bush or trying to be coy or whatever. You feel them, you see them in their entirety. You just connect with them and you follow them in their journey. And so generally, as a writer, starting out as writing poetry, then saying, okay, maybe I can do a little literary fiction, and then it's speculative fiction for me now, because I also grew up watching a lot of Western films, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and whatnot. So that also really influenced my writing. But at the same time, getting older and discovering Nnedi Okorafor, a host of Leslie Nekarima, who does this undescribable thing she does with speculative fiction that I cannot even comprehend. I cannot even begin to describe it. I cannot even begin to comprehend it. It's just a thing that you just absolutely get lost in. I don't even know where to begin. She's just brilliant. That's the only word I can use. Reading Kintu by Jennifer Makumbi, and so I realized that I could tell this because when we are watching Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, as much as I really enjoyed it, I think I said this in my Africa in Dialogue interview, as much as I really enjoyed the stories, I really got immersed in them. They didn't really look like me. I didn't believe that I could really see myself in that light, or see anybody like me in that light, in as much as there were also very spiritual films being made here. I remember watching Egg of Life, and I left the house outside because there was nowhere going to stay inside alone after watching that film. So I just left the house outside until my parents came back. And in as much as watching those, they were mostly very scary. They were mostly very, very, very scary speculative stories. So maybe that's why I was not really, really into them like that, because they were doing a very good job of terrifying me, as opposed to what the Westerners were offering. But when I became an avid reader, when I discovered Nnedi Okorafor and Nneka Leslie Arima and a host of other brilliant speculative writers, that was a push that I can do. I believe that I can tell brilliant speculative stories as well. It's not something that was designed for a particular set of people. It's not just for particular. Yeah, there are aspects of my upbringing, my tribe. It was the whole thing. I just realized that I can tell the stories as well, and that really informed really informed my writing. So the journey so far, I think it's, especially for this year, I think it's been very memorable. It's still, like I said, it's still a journey. It's still one that I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes from here. Yeah.
And I know that you studied sciences in school, and so you are sacrificing your science to do writing, your biochemistry to do writing. Did you finish studying biochemistry?
I finished studying biochemistry at very great cost. I finished studying biochemistry. But at the same time, it helps because I also write science fiction. So I might not be starting people with injections right now or trying to get blood samples. Well, it helps when I try to write science fiction, maybe especially when it's the ones pertaining to biological sciences, it kind of comes a little bit easier to me. Actually, yeah, it kind of comes easy to me because this is something that actually what I wanted to study was wildlife. That was actually the plan. I wanted to study forestry and wildlife conservation, or it was between that and being a writer. I remember I was like going to starve to death. How can the first son be studying all these weird courses? She's gonna study medicine, so I can't pack money for her. But it was the whole thing. And yeah, so it's still, even though biochemistry was not really what I wanted to go into, being a writer, it also helps to inform my writing, especially when it comes to science fiction, so that I don't, because some of the reviewers on this side can be very intense. You might use the units for maybe a system or a measurement, and you might exaggerate it a bit, and they will pick it. They will just pick it and be like, this is not the speed of light. Or they can be very particular about that. So it has really informed my writing as well. It's not entirely a loss. I won't say it entirely a loss. And not just for the writing. Studying biochemistry itself was actually a journey. It taught me a lot of things. It taught me persistence. It taught me tolerance. And it just taught me to just, regardless of all odds, just keep swinging. Yeah. So, yeah.
And do you have a job now? Are you working?
Yeah.
Full-time job?
Yeah. It's not really full-time, but I'm an associate editor with Cast of Wonders.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I help them in their reading process and their editing process. I don't know if because at that point, I was the only Black writer, editor at that moment when I was working with them, because they were really trying to be inclusive at that point. They were really trying to bring in writers from all over the world, editors from all over the world, because they were getting stories from all over the world. Mm-hmm. So they really wanted to give each story the time that it needed. They really wanted to be thoughtful with each story. So whenever a story came, because I saw stories from Nigeria, and whenever those stories came in, they'd be like, "Oh, Somto, there's this story, and we think you will do it justice as opposed to us. We think that you should be able to tell us or be able to better." So it was a thing, and it was an entire thing. So when those kind of stories came in, stories they felt that it was not, they didn't have the knowledge or the grounding to be able to properly edit or work with the story. They always seek my opinion about those stories. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we go, one last question, and you can say that in one sentence or two if you like. What advice could you give to people? I know you probably would still think of yourself as just starting, but what advice would you give to people who are really still starting as writers? What has helped you so far as a writer?
So in one word, I think I'll just say that for people who really want, I still consider myself an upcoming writer. So for upcoming writers like myself, I'm going to say that we are all worthy. That's just it. We are worthy of being heard. Our stories are worthy of being told. And against all odds, you can be the writer that you believe you can be. You just have to believe that you are worthy of being one. And yeah, that's mostly it. Yeah.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Somto.